with Justin Green. Okay.
It's highlight board.
We do
So I just hit that one. No problem. I think we're ready. Seems like that's 10:21. Yeah. I am from Build a Green. I started Build a Green about 10 years ago. Does everyone know what Build a Green is? Anyone? No one? Okay. So I'll talk. Well, so basically, this presentation, I'm gonna talk about what Build a Green does as a social enterprise, and sort of the main focus of our work, which is construction and demolition waste, and trying to divert that through reuse from the landfill. And sort of construction and demolition waste as a waste stream is pretty much unaddressed in New York, New York State, New York City. There are no regulations that require recycling or its diversion, and it's about 40% of the waste stream. It's the kind of thing you never really hear about. And that's why we started Build a Green, because when you go by dumpsters on construction sites, you see plenty of reusable materials. So we opened it, I started it in a old foundry in Astoria 10 years ago now. We started it with materials from the Durst Organization, one of the biggest green developers in the city, was tearing down 19 buildings around Times Square for the Bank of America building. And we got about 80 tons from that building and another building of all sorts of materials from, toilet stalls to peep show booths to mahogany paneling. We launched our second reuse center in Brooklyn in 2011, and then immediately got flooded by Sandy because we opened right on the Gowanus. We've grown to about 2 million in sales, and we have 30 staff people. And we're a social enterprise. We're a nonprofit. So all of our revenue that we generate goes back into growing our enterprise or starting new initiatives. We get some of our staff pulling up a radiator out of the basement. We get donations from people doing renovations, from demolitions, from film sets, cabinets, lumber, appliances, furniture, anything people can reuse in their homes. It spans the spectrum. We get things from the urinals from before the devil knows you're dead to we were just at the Condé Nast building looking at their cafeteria, maybe hopefully getting some of the materials out of that Frank Gehry cafeteria, to things as simple as a radiator that can be reused in someone's house. We've used our net revenue as a social enterprise as an engine to help fund other initiatives throughout the city, other environmental initiatives. So we helped Film Biz Recycling get started. We incubated them for a year. They focus on sets, and we launched and developed New York City Cool Roofs, which was painting reflective coating on affordable housing and nonprofit routes around the city. We did 1 million square feet. We just started this 2 years ago, Millworks. So we're starting to mill salvaged lumber. It's been on hiatus right now, but this idea started with after Irene and Sandy, when we saw there were over 10,000, 15,000 trees that had been knocked over during Sandy and Irene and just get basically chipped and thrown out. Or there's some mulch applications, some waste energy applications, but trying to find basically ways to add value to the waste stream to help keep materials out of the landfill, keep adding jobs, and keep growing our social enterprise. But you see there's a stack of bowling alley floor. So we've taken in 3 or 4 bowling alleys. One which actually was from Kingston, which was not being destroyed. They're not tearing it down. They were just replacing it, which was nice. So we got sort of the used bowling alley, and people buy it for countertops. And But we developed the Millworks because we work a lot with job training programs, and we wanted to give people sort of a more advanced training rather than just sort of warehouse work, which is what we typically do with our job training programs, but to start to train people in woodworking. Our sort of biggest initiative currently, in addition to the reuse center, the building material reuse center, is composting. About 4 years ago, we started. We're all sort of sick of not seeing composting options in the city 4 years ago, and we started, collecting it, hosting a community group that was doing composting, doing pick drop-offs at farmers markets, and composting at community gardens. And we kept growing and growing. We were then sponsored by Department of Sanitation, and have since grown to. That's our site underneath the Queensboro Bridge, by the way. And then we've since grown to, we diverted 1 million pounds of organics last year. What we do, we take those from various drop-off sites, from City Harvest, from woodworkers, from Parks Department. We compost it, and then we give away the resulting materials. Because we're funded by the city, we can do that. We don't have to earn income from it like the social enterprise side. So we give that compost away to 130 community groups around the city doing tree care, doing community garden work. It's an interesting process. The city's jumped forward in a lot of ways. So when we started this, we were trying to figure out the social enterprise angle for it. And it's really difficult to do compost from a social enterprise angle because you have to be at really high quantities of material to have it be economically viable. Even doing 500 tons a year, tipping fees are only like $80 a ton, $100 a ton. It's not going to really pay the rent. So, the city, amazingly enough, sponsored us, is launching other sort of community-based composting groups, or helping them get funded mainly through the botanical gardens, and using the model that we developed, the Lower East Side Ecology Center developed, Earth Matter, and is sort of piloting these projects around the city to see if this sort of community-based composting as a concept works versus sort of the standard, put it in a truck and ship it way out of the city and compost it. It's difficult in New York City to do it, obviously, a lot of space constraints, but we're in the process of the experiment now. It's 2 or 3 years in. We also, which I didn't put a picture in, have a vermicomposting bin that has about 1 million worms in it, and we're going to be generating about 45 tons of vermicompost each year. What also other big changes are, this is sort of social enterprise, I threw this in there, but this is sort of recent thing, we were part of a larger nonprofit that did energy efficiency work that's going out of business. So in this past year, we started a new nonprofit to buy our assets from Community Environmental Center, and we're just launching our fundraising campaign to do that now. So we'll actually be independent. We started as part of a larger nonprofit. They had did energy efficiency work in low-income housing. During the stimulus, their budget went from $5 million to $30 million and back down to $5 million, and it just was way too much change for them to handle. So, and our, what we do as a building material reuse center is we divert 2,000 tons of building materials every year. We have over 6,000 customers. We have a lot of job training programs we work with, CWE, which is Consortium Workers Edge, which fast tracks people, job training guys from disadvantaged communities into construction union jobs. YIP, prison entry programs. And so that's part of our mission is, as a social enterprise, it's not only environmental, it's not only putting our revenue back into the community to launch other environmental initiatives, it's also to hire from disadvantaged communities. Also, use, not in terms of growing our social enterprise, which has benefits in and of itself, but we donate materials as well. So we built out about 2,000 garden beds with retired scaffolding. And the reason we started is construction and demolition waste. We started because it's sort of this, again, like composting. We started enterprise in relation to composting, the city, came around much quicker than it's come around on construction and demolition waste. Construction demolition waste is still untouched and unregulated. It's regulated, but there's no recycling sustainability requirements for it. There's massive amounts of it. It's 325 million tons of C&D waste annually in the U.S. 30% of the materials landfilled are construction and demolition waste. And tremendous amount of buildings are getting torn down every year. Just some pictures. How much does that look like? What does that look like? We fill a typical city street 4 feet tall with trash and run that wall from New York City to Los Angeles 6 times. It's a lot of waste. New York City's been making a lot of progress, and right now, the commissioner, Catherine Garcia, is very innovative. The head of city council, the sanitation committee, Reynoso, is also really progressive. So we're at this sort of amazing time, and Bloomberg left, and sort of as he was leaving, was just like, did a bunch of crazy stuff that he didn't do during his term, but was great in terms of doing the curbside composting, instituting, sort of pushing for a ban on single-use styrofoam, which has now just come into place, the electronics recycling bills. So in the past 3 to 4 years have been all these great changes in how New York City has started handling its waste. So it gives me hope that finally the time has come for us to start thinking about how to improve how we handle construction and demolition waste. The way waste works in New York City is residential waste is picked up by the city government. Commercial business waste is picked up by your sort of regulated haulers. And then construction and demolition waste has its own set of haulers. There's 700 different haulers around the city that take the construction demolition waste to specialized waste transfer stations in New York and in New Jersey, which makes it really hard to track how much construction demolition waste is being generated, because they typically goes across the border to New Jersey quite a bit. Those materials then get put on long haul trucks and sent to Ohio, West Virginia, incredibly long distances. Sometimes the New Jersey transfer stations can load them on train cars, but most of them go an incredible distance away to just be landfilled. With New York City, when you build in New York City, you got to tear buildings down. So there are going to be over 1,600 buildings tore down in 2014. 2015, I'm sure, is going to be on the same pace. So that's each building, if you can imagine how much waste that is when it's just getting torn down and mostly just thrown out.
Your statistics on the amount of C&D waste, was that just in the United States, or was that the world?
No, that's just the U.S. That's an EPA figure. And again, it's hard. The tracking it's really based on estimates. Even though there are disparate departments that sort of track how much the waste transfer stations are doing. That's Department of Environmental Conservation at the state level. The city does some of its own tracking through DSNY, but no one's really talking or publishing this information. And BIC, which is a Business Integrity Commission, which is set up to basically keep the mob out of waste hauling, also tracks the haulers. So there are all these sort of, and then Pennsylvania, New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Ohio aren't all talking to each other about that waste that's getting transported, a little bit, but not in a really accurate way. So a lot of these numbers you see are sort of estimates based on number of buildings coming down, how much, waste that generates, sort of doing these, you do these sort of spot studies where you study the waste for, a couple days coming into one waste transfer station and make estimates based on that. But New York City has about 19,000, based on those sort of estimates, has 19,000 tons of construction and demolition waste every day. Obviously, waste is a big, sort of using resources without being really careful about them has a tremendous impact on the environment. Landfills are the biggest producer of methane. Maybe fracking now, but that's sort of still, that's one of these sort of untapped or things that's still under study is how much methane gets released by fracking. But landfills have traditionally been where most methane is generated in the US. And on a life cycle analysis on climate change gases, it's usually based on a 100-year life cycle. But if methane comes out of the atmosphere after about 25 years, so it's 100 times more potent on a shorter life cycle. And it accounts for, at that 21 times, that sort of longer life cycle, it's still about 7% of New York City's climate change gas emissions come from our waste stream. Like I said, it's, the hauling of waste is a big impact. The depletion of raw materials is also one of the biggest impacts. It's 40% of all raw materials used annually in the US are for construction. And we just throw, on the flip side, we just turn around and throw all of those materials out again when they come out the other side. So that is, again, a massive amount of lumber, mining, concrete, steel that just gets chucked. I mean, steel, the one stream of material that is captured is metal, but typically a lot of times that's now sent to China and then back again. So there's a lot of energy in just moving it around to recycle it. But climate change gas emissions for the world, 3% come from the manufacture of steel, 5% come from the manufacture of concrete. So those are big impacts from just those two sort of main components of construction. It also, one of the things that regulation does is it helps, if we can regulate construction demolition waste, we create incentives for industry to respond, right? We required recycling of paper, and then paper plant, the city helped Visi open a paper plant at Pratt Visi in Staten Island, and now a market actually developed for paper eventually. And now as a commercial producer of recycling, cardboard, I get it picked up for free. I don't even have to pay for my paper to get picked up anymore because this market's developed where they pay the transfer stations for the paper. And that happened, in a large part because the city started to require recycling, so someone could build a plant in Staten Island to take that paper and make, all the pizza boxes that New York City uses, and created, 300 jobs. But it happened because the city created this regulatory framework that allowed sort of, investment, basically gave investors the confidence to put money into a paper plant. The same thing is happening right now. You see where the compost, so one of the biggest processors in Delaware just closed because of sort of bad management, but no other, big waste handlers have stepped up to open up composting facilities around New York. And the reason they've done that is because the law that's currently in place for commercial, there's a law currently in place that's going to ask commercial establishments of a certain size to start composting, in 2015, if there's enough of a capacity. But it's a chicken or the egg thing. If you say, oh, if there's enough capacity, people are like, well, what if there's not enough capacity and you don't require it? And then I've just spent $20 million on a composting facility. So there's too much uncertainty in the current regulation to really allow for sort of investment in the facility. So that's just one of these issues about regulation and investment. Again, for the prices for construction demolition waste have been rising, making disposing waste in New York City more expensive. You have to take it further away. But in response, industry does respond to this. So a lot of the fill, concrete and brick and asphalt in New York City do get recycled because it's expensive to dump, and there are relatively easy downcycling uses for it in terms of fill material. You grind it up. It can be used to, when you're on a building site, fill the site up. And so there are a bunch of transfer stations in addition to the regular transfer stations that are just clean fill stations that take that ground up brick. And actually, Department of Transportation just started allowing it to be used in their roadbed, which is another creating a market. One of the things government can do is create a market for those recycled materials. It's and So here's sort of, the waste management hierarchy. I think we're, all probably pretty familiar with, but it's, this is as applied to sort of building, but it's, in terms of reducing our impact while we're building, it's, rethinking design, looking at, do we need to tear this building down? Can we incorporate it into an existing building? Reducing how materials are packaged. Try to design so that the materials are used efficiently. We have less cutoffs, so the space is actually designed to maximize material efficiency. After reduction of waste, we go to deconstruction and reuse, which is where we come in, which is taking building materials apart to reuse them. Deconstruction is basically carefully disassembling for reuse. And then recycling, and finally, composting, burning, landfill. Waste reduction is the first place to start. It just comes into design and how materials can be, like buildings can be reincorporated, how we're careful with waste and making sure our design specs take that into account. What can be recycled out of buildings? Well, pretty much all of it. I mean, it's there are certain things that can't be recycled, but it's more of a technology thing. But metal, glass, carpet, and ceiling tile, like a concrete brick or fill materials, wood can be turned into wood chips. But there are other higher uses. Why not have a particle board manufacturer in the city for all the wood waste? Drywall can be recycled back into more drywall. Cardboard, fluorescent lamps can be recycled to capture the mercury too. And sort of recognizing this, a Green Codes Task Force in 2010, which was Urban Green Council and a bunch of other folks, suggested, required, the recycling of new gypsum, carpet, ceiling tiles, and large dimensional lumber. So I'm going to show some of the numbers they put in their Green Code Task Force. You can find it online, along with many other suggestions for improving New York's codes, making New York's building codes greener. But clean gypsum, it's like there are a lot of cutoffs when you're doing drywall. You're cutting out around windows and doors and ceilings, whatever. There's all this clean gypsum that then just gets thrown out. It produces sulfur dioxide out of landfills, and it can easily be recycled. But currently, almost none of it gets recycled. And there are gypsum manufacturers actually relatively close to the city. Most folks, like U.S. Gypsum, these bigger companies don't ship it very far. But none of it gets recycled now. There's no requirement. There's no infrastructure. Same goes for carpet. Carpet, there's massive amounts of carpet every year. 3.5 billion pounds of carpet discarded in the U.S. annually. This comes from the U.S. Carpet Manufacturers website. And only 14% is currently being recycled. So that's all ending up in a landfill. It's all petroleum, byproducts, petroleum products that are just being chopped out instead of recycled, meaning we're, I don't know if it counts as carbon storage or not. But the proposal from the Green Codes Task Force was that, okay, well, if we look at an economic breakpoint, it's about 10,000 to 20,000 square feet of carpet tile. Carpet will be economically feasible. You'd actually see cost savings if you aggregate it and send it to these carpet recyclers. And then even with that just sort of economically easy strategy, we'd still capture 57 million square feet of carpet in New York City. Yeah.
Now, by recycling of carpet, you mean that they melt it down or something?
Yeah. Yeah, they basically make it back.
The bed bugs get killed.
Oh yeah, no.
Largely like to stay on people's carpet.
Yeah, no. This is a real industrial process. I mean, right now it happens in Georgia for the most part, but again, it's an infrastructure thing. If we require it here, maybe we have manufacturing nearby. But
what does it come out as?
It comes out as carpet, right back in. So Interface is one of sort of pilot of this project where if you buy from Interface, they take your carpet and they recycle it back into their carpet.
Technically, they're leasing a lot of it.
Yeah, leasing, which is a really cool thing. Yeah, it's technically a lease where you buy Interface, you return it to them and they give you some more and you're renting it. So that I mean, there's capacity basically, and it's doable, and it could generate, more economic growth around the city. Same goes for ceiling tiles, right? So those all get thrown out. There's a plant, an Armstrong plant in Pennsylvania that has the capacity to do 300 million square feet a year. They receive a tiny portion of what could be recycled. And again, the economic breakpoint. So what that means basically is like you take the ceiling tile down, it's a different process. It has to be put on a pallet, loaded onto a box, like a long haul truck, and take it to their recycling plant. Slightly more costly, but if you're not paying for multiple dumpsters, then you're going to see the cost sort of hit a break point at around 20,000 to 30,000 square feet. And we could, at that economically viable point, recycle 11 million square feet of ceiling tile. That's enough to cover half of Prospect Park. It's a lot of ceiling tile. And it's close by. It's already in Pennsylvania. It's not like sending it even to Georgia. It's right here. It'd be closer than a landfill. Also lumber is one of the things we do. So there are a lot of folks that other organizations beside us that take in lumber and sell it to, especially timbers. There's a big market for yellow pine timbers, turning them back into flooring. Smart demo companies know that, and they get paid for the timbers versus, paying to throw them out. But there's also, we're developing a whole new market. We started scaffolding, taking in scaffolding and reselling it and reusing that. No one had been doing that before we started doing it 2 years ago, but you see all the construction going up, that all is scaffolding after one use, that all gets thrown out.
Does wood that's being recycled, that's like treated with various chemicals and whatnot, affect the system? Yeah, well, we avoid,
most of it's untreated. Like typically the treated lumber is like the creosotes for, that's really, dangerous, sort of arsenics, creosotes. Most treated lumber is dangerous. You don't want it in your mix. We don't take it in. We don't sell it. And most of the scaffolding doesn't bother having treated lumber. They just...
Can you like recycle that?
Well, we try to keep the treated lumber out. The recycling versus the sort of reusing, they try to keep that out of their waste stream because a lot of it's getting used for compost, mulch or landscaping. So the state actually monitors that because most of the wood that's getting recycled, it's going for mulch. And if people start putting a lot of treated lumber or dirty lumber in there, it makes for the mulch you don't want to use. There's a lot of benefits to recycling. We sort of touched on most of those, but it can save money if it's done right. There are consultants out there that work with contractors to save money on big projects by diverting waste and setting up, like trying to get them to change the patterns. There's a lot of competing interests on a construction site, mainly because the guys doing demo just want to get it done faster. They don't really care about the dumping costs because they're going to pass it on to the owner. So you have to it's a good place to sort of come in and try to reorient the whole process to set up source separation, and then you see savings because you're taking the glass to a clean glass place and they're not charging you as much. These are sort of the savings illustrated. If you, this is like a tip fee per ton. This is in the Boston area, and transportation costs also are expensive. But if you can see like metals, you actually get paid. That's the tip fee cost, purple. But this is like mixed, dirty waste. But if you're doing clean lumber, it's a little bit less. If you're doing concrete, clean fill, it's a lot less. So there are potentials for cost savings, but you have to sort of re-engineer the way people typically do business. Disadvantages of recycling, I don't know if these are most of the metal, a lot of metal is getting collected and shipped, abroad for recycling. It also reduces chance for reuse. If there are reuse, there's a lot of energy, and there's energy back into reprocessing it, melting it down, resmelting it, all that. And we have to define recycling pretty carefully to make sure that we're having a positive impact if we require it. A lot of the recycling numbers that construction companies were using a couple years ago included alternative daily cover. So LEED, does everyone know what LEED is? It's sort of the green building rating system that rates how well you're doing environmentally on a number of different components. And it allowed for alternative daily cover, which is basically grinding up waste material and putting it on top of a landfill. And they're saying, oh, that was recycled. Now that's, with this current LEED, that's changed, so they can't do that. So that means that, you know, folks were getting 85, 90% recycling rates 5 or 6 years ago. Now it's going to be like 40%. Because it's literally going to cut that recycling rate in half because it was all just being ground up and put on top of landfills. But it's, again, these sort of definitions are important to figure out the environmental impact. Also, I've talked to like certain New Jersey waste transfer stations, like, what, tell me what kind of recycling rate you want. Just tell me. No one's like, you know, they're not going to get in trouble if they say, oh, it was 80%. Like they can, so that's one of the other issues. It's not, since it's not monitored by government and given an official number, there's, you know, some issues of self-reporting. It's less likely to reuse material. You know, reuse, you know, our model has created a triple bottom line. We have, you know, warehouses where we have created 30 jobs. You know, we've done that without a lot of assistance from the city or state. I mean, we're basically self-supporting social enterprise, and we take 2,000 tons of material every year and generate over $2 million of revenue. That's like over $1,000 a ton. So while folks are paying $100 a ton to get material thrown in the landfill, we've actually shown this ability to generate $1,000 a ton from the value of that material. Not easy in New York City. I mean, our Astoria store that's been there 10 years is now shockingly in the way of luxury condo development. And, you know, cost of just rent in New York City are astronomical. So, and you have to pay people a living, you know, as a social enterprise, we pay people starting at, you know, $15 an hour. So costs of doing business are high. It's not a slam dunk. It's a lot of reuse is complicated because, you know, we don't know what's going to come in from one day to the next. If something sells really well, we can't reorder it. So we never know what we're going to get. We never know. We always have to rearrange it. We have to price everything that comes in. We don't know what something is, and we have to research it and figure out what the price is. So it takes a lot of effort, you know, and every time I'm thinking about how much effort you know, when you're moving that toilet, I think about how much effort went in onto the side of production and all the resources that were consumed, and sort of like puts everything into perspective. But here, some pictures of denailing lumber, a training program denailing lumber, various products made out of reused material. You know, waste reduction is one of the easiest, most straightforward ways to reduce global warming from waste generation. It doesn't require much energy, water, or other air pollution. You know, we can, on our jobs, save the donor on project costs and tax deductions. You know, we can save buyers on buying their kitchen cabinets from us. So there's another benefit, sort of economic benefit. We preserve historically significant items. So there's like a bullhead from a dairy that used to exist in the city. This is a post office that was at Penn Station. Now it's at a casino in Las Vegas. There was a bunch of them. We had like 30 of them. So there's some casino in Las Vegas with all these. Lots of, you know, historically interesting plumbing fixtures. A lot of interesting design that's come out of materials purchased from our store. These are all slab doors from offices that were turned into a sort of staircase, you know, seating areas. We've worked with low tech. These are all really, these are all metal doors like metal fire doors that they painted red, and they open into this kitchen closet situation. Low-Tech does interesting work. Nightwood, another designer. These are all salvaged pieces of lumber. Apologies was done by Home. This is a bathtub. Like, so like, you know, this is a wine barrel. All came from our store. And Apologies is cool. The Home, so they also salvaged lumber. I can't remember where this one is at. Mission Dolores is HO, another design build company. So we sell, most of our clients, our customers are sort of homeowners, people sort of renovating their own homes, but we have most contractors don't come in, but we get design build contractors that come in, see what we have, and create their design around what they find. And it's a whole different design process, but it leads to some like interesting spaces that look lived in, you know, from the second that they're installed. They look like they've, you know, been there forever, or at least the material has. I feel like the material has some sort of, you go into some like a Bennigan's that's made to look old, but you're like, this isn't old. But the materials have sort of almost life to them. You know, deconstruction is our process. So you can do different types of deconstruction. You can do a full home deconstruction, or what we call skim deconstruction. For the most part, we do skim deconstruction in the city. We've done a couple of jobs of full house where we take the building apart, you pull up the floorboards, salvage all the lumber. I mean, a barn like this, we salvaged, you know, any board that wasn't rotten. So about 100% of that building got salvaged, you know, except for the cutoffs from where the nails and boards were joined together. You know, New York City's not easy to do this work in, but in some ways it is easy, because a lot of the demo that happens for even in the sort of interior, so we went to the Condé Nast building this week, 18 floors are going to be demoed. They're all, you know, full of like sliding glass doors and cool glass panes and the Frank Gehry stuff. None of that's, no one's coming in with like a wrecking ball. You know, all that stuff is being pulled out by hand and taken down by an elevator. So there's a potential in New York City for this to really happen, the aggregation of carpet tile and ceiling tiles to happen, for the careful removal of material for reuse to happen, because it's already still happening by hand. It's just like guys in there, you know, workers pulling stuff and moving into the elevator. You don't have to smash it at the same time to get it in the elevator. So that, you know, New York City, it's complicated because of the logistics, which are nuts, but it's possible because of that, the restrictions of that, most of the work having to be hand job. Even demos of buildings and, you know, next to each other, often hand done. They're not coming in with, like, if you're in the suburbs, they come in with an excavator and scoop up the building and put it in the dumpster. That doesn't happen in New York City because the other buildings are too close. There's another building we did. Then skim deconstruction sort of covers what probably everyone could imagine. And then we have these nice marble sinks that we get in, antiques, kitchen cabinets, lighting fixtures, bathroom fixtures, whole gamut. You know, here's us removing a cabinet set, which we do regularly. Every week we're moving a couple cabinet sets. You know, each cabinet set diverts, you know, 1,200, 1,500 pounds of material from the landfill. Contractor can save some money in labor costs because they're not paying their guys to do it if we do it. The homeowner can save money in a tax deduction. Maybe they can get their contractor to give them a break, I don't know. But the buyer will save some money in renovation. 5? Uh-oh. All right, so I'll skip through some of these, but these are just some examples of jobs we've done and materials we've salvaged over the years. Let's see if there's anything really interesting. Flooring is another thing. It's a lot of work to salvage, but it's really high value. Institutional, the best jobs are where we get like a big building, but it's fairly rare that we get a developer to call us in for a whole building when they're doing a conversion. You know, how to implement deconstruction. There are ways that the architects, a lot of architects are more interested in doing it than contractors. So, but there, certain steps you can take to make sure deconstruction, waste management happens on a job. Make sure you think about it before it's the day before. That's a big problem. You can spec it into job contracts. A lot of the Condé Nast building, we got there and they'd already sent 25 trucks of material donations to other groups for the Dursts. They'd already organized that to, Materials for the Arts got, thousands of Aeron chairs. So if you have Materials for the Arts membership, go get your Aeron chair now. Department of Buildings, has allowed deconstruction to happen before demo. So we've talked to them about it. It's okay for us to come in and start doing the work. It's challenging in New York City, space constraints, sort of the various waste management streams. Not really easy to see, but I got 5 minutes. It's, like I said, it's sort of difficult to track in New York City because of private transfer stations, the information not really aggregated by government or an independent agency. Prevailing wage is high. Industry, there's lots of issues with industry in New York City waste hauling. But I think you can, if you're a architect, you can have C&D waste specifications, set goals, work with your contractors, train them, and you can get them. We've seen it happen for improved recycling rates and reuse rates. For government needs to really step in though for it to really happen. We need to define it at a city or state level, set diversion rates for the city and state, start to really assist folks in recycling and reuse, waste exchange, publishing model ordinances for cities around the country, the state anyway. Government's doing more purchasing of aggregate and recycled content, not allow ADC to count towards our recycling rates. There's other policies that you can do. There's just a whole bunch of ideas, but allowing pre-demolition salvage periods, a deconstruction period permit that's easier to get than a demo permit. There's some interesting in San Jose. You can restrict construction demolition waste from landfills. That's what happens in Massachusetts. So they're banning certain things from the landfill, just like the Green Coats Task Force was suggesting. That's led to more investment in fancier waste transfer stations that divert material. You can provide official, I would like official recycling rates. That's what they also do in California. So if you take your material to one transfer station, they're a 60% recycler. This is a 70% recycler. The information's already there at government level, just would sort of need to be made public and made obvious to folks choosing where their waste is going. You can raise tipping fees on waste and put a tax. Pennsylvania put like a $3 per ton tax, and then all of a sudden the materials started going to Ohio. That was just all it took, was $3 per ton for folks to start shipping more material to Ohio. So Massachusetts has banned on a bunch of different materials. California, has voluntary certification of their transfer stations, their recycling centers, and they have this is like what I think is the most interesting. You put down a deposit. When you get a demo permit, you put down a deposit, just like with a bottle or can, and you get back a certain amount of that deposit based on what you recycled or reused. And that way, okay, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, but there's at least an economic incentive, and it takes that money back into the agency that's regulating, that's tracking the waste, and it's sort of a clean way of doing it. The bans are good too, but a lot of that material still just leaves Massachusetts then and goes to other states. So it finds a leaky way out. And that's it. Yeah. Questions? Yeah.
What's one of the biggest things that could possibly reduce that break-even point for several of the other materials?
I think once you start to regulate it, the infrastructure starts to develop and competition starts to happen. Right now, there's really only one or two aggregators in the city for carpet tile and ceiling tile. you know. But if you require it, then the demo companies will just start doing it themselves. Then they'll integrate it into their process. You won't have to bring in an aggregator. It'll just be part of what demo contractors do. That'll bring down the cost. They already have all these resources and space, and it'll just, the waste transfer stations will just set it aside, and it'll be aggregated there. Just the regulations start to just change the whole process, and that, you know, markets do respond to that. You know, so you can use government regulation and the market incentives to really change people's processes, and that will create, using market efficiency to change how much it costs to do business. Yeah.
Listen, thanks for coming, and also thanks for doing this.
No
I've
problem.
worked in recycling in other cities. Not every city has groups doing things like this so successfully, and it's envious from the point of view
Thanks.
of Chicago. I did want to, and with that in mind,
Yeah.
this is from someone who supports recycling.
Okay.
Give one more disadvantage of recycling.
Yeah.
That is, historically, for more than a century, salvage and recycling work has been amongst the most dangerous work to do
Sure.
in industrial society. And you talked a little bit about some of the safeguards here, but I have a two-part question. Could you talk a little bit more about what it's like for the workers to actually handling this material? And also, are there things the city and state can do to make your workers safer?
Well, it's you know, like any construction job. I mean, it's sort of in line with any construction demo job. They're all hard on your body. I mean, that's the biggest impact for us, is less, you know, danger and more back injury.
That's a danger.
Yeah, I mean, it's a danger, but it's like, that's one of the challenges, but it's a challenge across any construction job site, really. So we're similar to that, but deconstruction slows things down a little bit. So that offers a little bit of safety on this hand jobs. You know, it's a difference between an excavator and a hand job. Excavator is probably safer. But if everyone is having to do hand demo, then it's sort of equivalent across. And then if you're doing deconstruction, you are sort of slowing things down a little bit and taking things apart more carefully. So it's a little bit safer from that angle. You know, and I think, you know, in terms of general job safety, I mean, you know, it's an ongoing concern for us. You know, I mean, it's like one of the things we worry about. We try to mechanize everything we can. You know, have as many dollies and try to have people work together. At our situation, at our organization, like, don't lift anything by yourself that's too heavy. Make sure you get help. Slow down. You know, so that's all. What we try to do is just make sure people are well equipped to do the job. You know, there are all sorts of crazy things, like Lower East. If you go to pick up in the Upper East Side, they make you go into the basement and then bring things up the stairs because they don't want you to go out the front door. So I mean, that's, government could be like, you're not allowed to do that. Like, you can't make deliveries go downstairs and through like a convoluted basement and up an elevator. You know, Upper East Side, fancy co-op. You have